people?
The American people are so much stronger, so much more resolved than any enemy can fully understand. As a nation, we're united. And when people harm Americans, we don't retreat. We don't forget. We take care of those who are grieving. And when that's finished, they should know we will follow them to the gates of hell until they are brought to justice. Because hell is where they will reside.
Was that what the American people want to hear? I think so. And if so, how far is this war-weary and war-wary country willing to go? Here in Washington, there's a drumbeat for action. It's coming from Democrats and Republicans alike. Does the president himself hear that drumbeat? Mike Barnichel's an MSNBC contributor, and Michael Steele's the former chair of the Republican National Committee. Michael, an MSNBC political analyst. Michael, I watch you every morning, and I have to tell you, I do remember one really good thing W did. He went into the war he had to go into after Afghanistan, going after them. He followed them all the way back to their caves. And when he said, we're going after the people that did this, who knocked down these buildings, that was one moment of almost, it was fabulous. The Henry V stuff coming out of the president then. This president doesn't seem to want to give us a Henry V moment. Why not?
Well, I think he's a little protective of himself, Chris. I think he's clearly a thoughtful guy. He is a methodical guy. Joe Biden is a thoughtful guy, but he's not a methodical guy. And that clip that you just showed of Joe in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, you've got to realize he's standing within a 45-minute drive of the home of the Foleys, the parents of Jim Foley, who was executed 2 weeks ago. And Joe was unafraid to express out loud the horror that most Americans feel about these executions and about what might be on the horizon. You use the phrase war, everybody uses the phrase war-weary. You use the phrase war-weary, W-A-R-Y, and that's an apt phrase to use today because we ought to remember, all of us out there ought to remember with all of this talk, all of these op-eds, all of this radio conservative right-wing talk, all of these tweets that 50 years ago this summer, Chris, the Gulf of Tonkin resolution was passed. And 11, 12 years later, there are 58,000 names on a wall in Washington, D.C. We're going to get ISIS. We're going to clean their clock. But let's pump the brakes and do it the correct way with a bunch of other nations in a coalition.
Here's a question I put to you about the visceral reaction, which I felt it during the Iranian hostage crisis when I was writing speeches for President Carter. I hate it every day. I love the job, the honor of it. Every day I hate it. I go to a bar, people are mad at me. Because here our guys were just being trooped around and the flag was being burnt, but they weren't being beheaded. I don't think any president can take 2 weeks, every 2 weeks another beheading, or whatever the sequence is going to be. And the president can talk, as Mike did well there, about how someday we'll get them, we'll encircle them, we'll put an alliance together against them, we'll coalition, we'll get them eventually. Eventually, that could be 60 beheadings from there.
Well, right, and I think that is part of the problem, the paradox that this administration finds itself in. You've got Joe Biden who's saying, we will follow them to the gates of hell. Well, some of us are asking, well, what does that mean? Does that mean boots on the ground? Does that mean a military engagement? Does it mean coalition forces? The definitional aspect of this, Chris, I think bothers people more than anything else. So whether you're war-weary or war-wary, what you want to know is what are you going to do given the crisis that's currently in front of the administration? It is boxed in the corner, and you and I have talked about this before, on its earlier efforts to get out of Iraq, and now it finds itself having to circle back in through another door, if you will, and that's a problem, rhetorically and otherwise, for the president.
Michael, the road to the gates of hell, you know this, a lot of people know this, the road to the gates of hell leads through Damascus, through Syria. We do not need, 10 years after we invaded Iraq, we do not need another crusade. In Riyadh, they know that ISIS is coming for the throne. In Cairo, they know ISIS is coming for them. They know it all throughout the Middle East. So there's a shot clock on this attack against ISIS, definitely. I agree with you. But it's not going to be forever. It's not going to be months. It's going to be, I think, within a couple of weeks. From the reporting I've done, from what I've heard, it's going to be within a couple of weeks.
What's it going to look like?
It's going to be fierce. It's going to be determined.
What will it look like, Michael? Michael Barnichel, what will it look like?
Well, I think you already have people on the ground, American soldiers, American special ops on the ground in Syria right now. You certainly have them in Iraq. You're going to see, it's going to be very reminiscent of the Bush attack against Afghanistan, with people on the ground rooting out and getting the Taliban in the initial stages of that war. It's going to be very much like that scenario, but it's going to be with the express support of the Saudis, of the Jordanians, of the Turks. It's got to be.
Well, I can't wait. I've been watching. We've been giving arms, and I'm not against it, to all those Arab countries for years. We've given money to Jordan, to Egypt, to the Saudis, as you point out. We give them a lot of firepower from the air. Why are we the only firepower from the air? But thank you, Michael. I'm hopeful now. You've got some reporting behind you.
If I could, just on that last point, I just want to make it very clear that Mike Barnicle and Joe Biden have expressed with much more clarity about what this should look like and how it should proceed than the president has, and that's part of the frustration that a lot of people feel.
I agree completely. Completely. Anyway, I do think there's a visceral reaction that Americans feel in their guts. They want their leader to have that visceral reaction. We are patriotic. We love this country. This is an attack on America. It's not a criminal act by one little group of people against some Americans. This is an attack on our country, us. I want to hear some of that noise from the president, but he's the president. And he's a little different than Mike Barnicle and Michael Steele, and certainly a lot different than Joe Biden. Anyway, up next, thank you, Michael, for coming on, staying up late tonight. You've been on all day. Anyway, the